How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Thanks for asking. Congratulations on the film.
Thank you.
Now, how familiar were you with Emily Brontë and Wuthering Heights before this?
Not very familiar. I obviously had read the book back in the day when I was younger, and I knew of the Brontes. I knew of the family. I knew, who they were, but I hadn't really gotten into the nitty gritty of their mechanisms and how they existed. So it was nice. I read a ton of biographies. Francis, the director, sent me a bunch of books to read, and I knuckled down and read everything I could get my hands on. But in a good sense, Emily Brontë specifically is very elusive. She's called the Sphinx of English literature. That's one of her names. So she's was a very private person. So there's not a lot about her, and the tellings that we do have of her are mostly of her sister. So it's a very it's not an objective point of view, if that makes sense.
Right. Charlotte Bronte wrote of her sister,
yes,
right?
And corrected her poems and posthumously, and Charlotte is also an interesting and also a genius, but those are the only kind of records we have of Emily Brontë through Charlotte.
I mean, you have such an interesting opportunity in taking on this role in that you can, if you have a mystery involving a person, which we do in Emily Brontë, you can be responsible to an audience member like me for helping unlock some of that mystery.
Yes.
What part of that mystery were you interested in unlocking or showing or in exploring? That's
a lovely way of putting it, by the way. I think because of this whole Sphinx thing, I think the main idea and what Francis really wanted to get at was this idea of authenticity, whatever that means for people. But I think in this sense, it was more just to humanize the Brontes and Emily specifically, who hasn't really we've never really, fleshed her out properly before. So I think this is a good opportunity for that. It's not a biopic. It's not a strict kind of retelling of her life. It's not a documentary. So it's really Francis used the kind of the basis of this real family and these real people and this real character, and then interwove elements of supernatural and the more Wuthering Heights aspects of that environment, if that makes sense. So it's a nice kind of collision of the two worlds.
Yeah, but what about you? Like, what were you interested in? I mean, you get to inhabit this person. Like, what were you interested in about her?
I wasn't, like I said, I wanted to kind of I wanted to figure out all of the little intricacies about her. And she's I think hopefully we see that there's quite an arc throughout the film. We see her go from this very shy, reserved person trying to figure out what her place is and what her role is in the family. And she's very observant and very quietly sort of intrigued by everything and everyone around her,
and sort of outside of the family,
and outside, and so it's nice being that person outside looking in. And then as we gradually move on in the film, we through her experiences, she develops her personality and her essence, and I think that's a nice way of doing it, is to kind of figure it out as you go along. And
I read an interview with the director Francis, and she talked about how. The decision, as you mentioned, it's not a biopic, it's not a documentary. There are parts of her story that are fictionalized, or at least we don't know whether, like, one of the big parts of the film is Emily Bronte's romantic relationship with this fella.
With this fella.
Yes. That's his name in the movie. People don't know that. It says, I saw his actor's name and then that fella.
That fella.
Yeah. Of course, we don't know if that happened and it's fictionalized.
Yeah, of course.
When you hear that you are going to be portraying someone real with a fictionalized romantic story, does that make you reconsider, or do you have to process something in order to take it on?
Yes. I didn't really know much about it in the beginning. I kind of was sent the scenes and I auditioned for the part of Emily Brontë, and that made a lot of sense for me because I wanted to kind of interpret a literary role but then I didn't know anything about their personal life story. So to me, it could have been fiction, it could have been real. I had no idea. And then it was only when I started reading and researching that I realized that was a fabrication, and that was more of a, Frances' imagining of her life and trying to, elevate it for this film. But really, I mean, from what we gather, Emily Brontë just liked to walk her dogs and cook. So, and obviously be a genius and write books and poetry. And she wrote in these tiny, tiny notebooks, and she wrote in such small writing. You can see them at the Haworth Museum, the Bronte parsonage. They wrote so small so that their toy soldiers could read the book. So that just kind of gives you an inkling of where they were at.
Can I ask you
yes.
an acting question?
Please.
So there's a scene in, I don't know anything about acting, and there's a scene in, and I don't want to spoil anything, but Emily, the character you play, and the real person you play, has the scene where she wears this mask.
Yes.
And it's this mask belonging to her father.
Yeah.
And the children, the Bronte children, play this game. And help me with this. It's sort of this white.
Yeah, it's like a white no mask in a way. It's frightening.
It's a mask devoid of expression.
Yes, it has nothing. It's a really neutral mask. They're playing a game.
Yeah.
The Brontes are playing a game, and they really did this. This is facts. They would play the mask game, and the father would ask them questions, and they'd have to guess. They'd have to play characters. It's kind of like a Guess Who, a Victorian age Guess Who with a mask. But the whole idea of that scene, that's really the clincher in the movie, I think, because it's Francis kind of messing with the audience. It's like we don't know if this is a real visitation or if it's Emily pushing the boundaries of how far she can play with her imagination. That's the whole point. Is it's supposed to that's kind of a metaphor that we find throughout the film, is this whole mask that Emily has to wear at certain points.
What's that like for you to have to act with that mask on? And I don't mean physically, but like it feels like a great test of acting.
Well, yes, and it's also very
horrible.
Yeah, no, it was awful. It was awful because it was very claustrophobic, because you have a mask on stuck to your face and you have to do all this very, well, I don't have to. I chose to do lots of heavy breathing and acting, but it was good. It was like 2 full days of just that. So it was pretty intense. And then I had to redo some of it in ADR, in post-production, because the sound is obviously all muffled. And there were lots of ways of doing it. And then in the edit, they kind of chose, there was some where I was moving and I was far more animated, some where I was completely still. So you get options of...
But you have to portray this without any expression on your face whatsoever. Isn't that a challenge as an actor?
Well, I can do what I want behind the mask.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was a bit like this, but I could, I could do what I want behind the mask. Anyway, that was great for radio. Whatever I just did there was fantastic.
Sticking your head up in front of your face, incredible for radio, I find. Yeah,
Thank you, yes.
That's it. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like to have to portray something to an audience.
It was how exciting, and it's the first time I'd worked with a mask, and I didn't go to drama school, but that's the kind of thing you learn in drama school, and so it felt, I don't know, I liked the challenge of it, definitely.
I was going to ask you whether you went to drama school, so that's interesting.
I didn't.
That's like a real classical acting thing you had to do there. I want to go back to the idea of Emily being an outsider in the family. Yes. And I think when you look at your career and the roles you've picked up over the years, the idea of being an outsider comes up over and over and over again. I think if you look at in your role in sex education, that's an outsider in a social group. Emily is an outsider in her family. And I'm wondering if portraying these outsiders makes you think at all about the relationship between being an outsider and being a creative person.
I know what you mean. There is probably quite a huge correlation, I'd imagine. And I like that. I always have a particular affinity for the quiet observers. I like the people who don't talk much and save, you know what I mean? Save the talking for the right moment, if that makes sense.
Why is that?
I don't know. It's just a trait I like. People who don't feel like they need to fill space up with stuff. You know what I mean? Unlike me, evidently, just like da-da-da-da-da. But no, Emily has that particular... She has this quite... You said mystery earlier, but she is shrouded in this mysterious aura. And there's something unfinished about her. It feels like she only got... Do you know what I mean? It feels like she's not like a full product. It feels like we only kind of just got a taste of what she could have achieved because she died so young. So it feels like there was a... Yeah, I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, but it does. But I'm stuck on what you said there about the idea of like of being an outsider on the sex education show and being an outsider in this as well, and that's interesting to you. Yeah,
but outsider, but putting their mind to the putting their energy into the service of their mind and intelligence and honing that, and I think that makes for sometimes great artists. I think so.
You smiled there when I mentioned the show first, the sex education show. Yeah. And I wasn't surprised because I was reading an interview with you before I came in. And, you used words when it came to that show that I hadn't seen people use too often when it comes to shows. Terrible. No, I'm only joking.
Awful.
Awful.
No.
Regretful. No.
Awful. That's horrible.
No, you said proud and important.
Did I?
Yeah.
Yes.
So that tells me that show means... Like it means something deeper to you than a gig, you know?
Well, it's also my first job, and so it's pretty special in that respect because it sets the tone for everything, and it's just a very special part, and it's a gift really to be able to do that kind of thing. And I, you can think what you want about Netflix, and it's a whole debate, and I have my own views on it. But that show I think has done a lot of good, and I see it and I hear it a lot.
What do you hear? What do you see?
What do you see? I see.
This is the mask right now.
I see these things. No, when people come up to you in the street or in interviews or whatever, I think it's been a really. Sorry, I'm umming and ahhing a lot. It's been a very essential show for a lot of people. You don't have to love it. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree with it. But I think it just touches upon quite a few things that potentially people felt alone in dealing with, and I think it's quite a reassuring show for a lot of people, and I like that, and I like that it can be used as a tool. And I've said this before, but I mean it. I think it's nice to mingle practical with art. If a creative, artistic thing can be a helpful tool to people and can make people feel less scared and alone, then great. You know what I mean? It's a really special thing.
So did Wuthering Heights. So did Wuthering Heights make
imagine?
People feel like class didn't matter as much, that it poked fun at a certain aristocratic class.
But it's also, it just took it to a new level. I mean, that family were obsessed with Byron, and they were obsessed with, multiple writers and a lot of Germanic writing and Gothic writers. So they were, Emily and Charlotte and Anne and Branwell were all kind of deeply absorbed in very, very different literatures. And that's, what a gift at that time to be, allowed to read as many books as you want and pour into, that's the dream. So you can see it in their writing, but it's just so fascinating how she managed to. And I feel like the older I get, the harder it is to read Wuthering Heights. I don't know. I felt like it was easier when I was younger to read Wuthering Heights. I don't know if that's a common thing, but I felt like it was tougher to read. I don't know.
Why is that now?
Because I don't know. I'm not going to go into the meanderings of my brain, but it feels like it was more complex to unpack because I was trying to analyze it more as opposed to just, do you know what I mean? As opposed to just experiencing the book. I think it's one of those books that just needs to be experienced as opposed to overly analyzed, which we all do in school with this, because it's a classic. But I don't know where I'm going with that, but I don't know what we were. Can I
tell you something else that
yes.
I saw another parallel between the sex education show and the Emily film.
Right. Me?
You got
the presence of me?
You got it. Turns out you were in both. I couldn't tell from the mask, but turns out, I have no questions now. That was my last one. There's a scene, I think it's the beginning of Sex Education, where one of the characters asks your character what they're into. Do you remember the answer to what was it?
Complex female characters.
Complex female characters.
Yeah.
I was reading this this study. My mother was an English teacher.
Oh, great.
So this study guide to Wuthering Heights last night, getting ready for this.
Interesting.
And
bit of homework.
Just doing a little bit of homework, but still not doing the full homework.
Yeah.
Still just reading the study guides.
Yeah. Still now.
Still cheating.
In adulthood.
35, cheating. It said, Wuthering Heights presents an opportunity to teach about, and I'm not joking around, it said strong but complex female characters. So at this stage in your career, what does that phrase mean to you? What does that expression mean to you? Oh. It's a big one, I know.
Well, yeah.
I'm curious.
These are not chilled questions.
Sorry.
This is so, it's fine. It's your job.
I got another card I can ask you about balloon colors if you want.
Oh, please do, yes.
Okay,
my favorite color is blue. It's obviously important. I don't want to play uninteresting people, but I also, I don't really have a list of, not qualifications, but I don't have a list of
qualities that you're looking
qualities that I'm looking for necessarily in a character. No, because it just has to make sense for where I'm at in that moment in my career or whatever, personal life or whatever. But I'm so glad I got to play already just a few very, very interesting pieces of work. But really, it's the story and that is the most important. So if the character, it's the story that's the most important to me. The script, I mean.
What about after? When you play, and listen, this very well may be me overthinking everything.
Oh, you think? This whole interview has been you over there, and I'm like, what am I doing?
You're killing it. And
Thanks.
I understand more about why you took on the role and a little bit in the role. But I have to imagine.
No, you're nervous. No.
I'm not. I'm just.
You have to imagine. Tell me.
Okay, I will. When you play a character who achieved great things creatively, yet wasn't appreciated in her time, that you probably carry something with you from that role into your own creative life going forward.
Yes, 100%. It's impossible to leave unscathed from any role, but specifically from that kind of role. Yes, definitely. But that's why I couldn't. It was really a no-brainer when the script came along, because it was so. I said she's unfinished Emily because in terms of her life, I feel like there was so much she could have done. But there's something quite powerful about working her whole life at, again, curating things in her brain and filling her brain with knowledge and literature and words, and then creating this one book as her legacy. It's pretty incredible. But I in that same respect, if I'm not that I've ever overthought it, but now I will because of
Thank you. Quite gracious of you.
Just thank you. But I no, it's definitely something to take into account, is how, the playing whole characters. Do you know what I mean? Having a whole palette of colours to explore. Emily had that, and that's why it was a no-brainer, because it was light and dark and funny and atrociously sad, and it had all of the things. It had all of the things.
Right.
So it's a joy. That's all you could ever ask for in a part or in a script or in a movie. That's what we do. So when you get given that chance and you get to just run free with it, it's pretty amazing.
To me, it made me think a lot about the importance of just making your work. Like, and I read this interview with you where you said something like, I think you said, you'd have to be a sociopath to want to be a celebrity. But I don't know.
Yeah.
But what to me that did was it delineated the world between making stuff,
Yeah.
and getting your picture taken for making stuff.
Yeah.
And Emily Brontë just made stuff.
She just made stuff.
Do you know what I mean? So that
She just made stuff, and she made stuff. They all had to write under pseudonyms, and there was there were lots of elements in the film when people watch it that aren't real. But that's why it's even more heartbreaking, because Frances gives a second lease of life to her and gives her a full life in this film that potentially she didn't have, and an element of celebration that potentially she wouldn't have had, and an element of respect from her peers that she wouldn't have had necessarily at the time. And I think that's it's like a thank you in a way. I think that's what Frances is trying to do.
But that's what made me wonder, are you like, do you carry that? That's what I was really wondering. Like, do you carry from Emily, who just made stuff and didn't worry about it too much, about getting a picture taken for making stuff? The statement the quote that I read from you tells me that you are interested in making stuff and not so much about...
Of course. Well, of course.
Not everybody is.
Well, fine. No, I know not everyone is, but I think it's important. That's the whole point. It's about making things, and it has to be about crafting things, and I have a lot of catching up to do, and I have a lot of films to watch and a lot of books to read, and I just am at this point now where I want to fill my brain with things, and if we want to make a parallel with Emily, then great. That I want to fill my brain, and I want to experience as much as possible in order to make the best things possible and make things that are going to last through the ages, not just going to be out for a week and then forgotten the next week because something else has come along that's in the same format and written in the same algorithm and in the same way, because it destroys everything. And now you've got me talking.
That's
but
lovely.
Now we're at the point of no return, and I feel like these films are important. Emily is important. TIFF is important. Independent cinema is important.
Yeah.
And it's just like we're like hanging on by a thread. But I feel like now is hopefully another time in the cycle of cinema and history and art or wherever, where people are new shoots are gonna grow, and we're gonna start getting interested in local independent cinema where people are actually making stuff that is important. And I just repeated the same words.
No, and
you know what I mean.
In the same way that Wuthering
Yeah.
Heights, I mean, hundreds of years later, we're still talking about art.
Yeah.
We're talking about this one piece of art.
In this darkened room.
Favorite color? I'm only joking. Lovely to meet you.
Lovely to meet you.